I think that's the kind of players that if I was an agent that I would want to have.
I'm going to, Kim, I'm going to go to you next, but before I do, Dominic Pittis has joined us, and we'll get back to Dom. Dom was coaching at Stockton, and he's now running a prep school program, boys and girls hockey in the California area. He's not returning to coach in the Flames organization. Played a lot of years of pro hockey, worked with the Flames as a skills coach, similar background to yours, Doug. But Doug has worked with Majapani, the Stockton team, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of connection in terms of the character things we've talked about moving up. But Kim, go ahead with your question, and we'll get back to Doug after that in terms of having questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I always use a quote with my teams: talent sets the floor and character sets the ceiling. So that's a big piece of what we do. But, I loved your point about social media, because it's such a big thing at, the level that I coach here in Toronto. And my players always get on me that, we don't do player profiles on Instagram of, one kid and where they've committed to. And I say, no, we post them all at the same time, and it's on a website. And if you want to go look at it and send it to your friends, like, that's fine, but we're not going to blow up the internet with it. But we also, we're the only team in the league, and we actually get in trouble for it. There's a protocol when they do the starting lineup that you're supposed to go player by player. So when your name gets called, you go to the line, and we don't go until everyone's been called, and we go as a team. And a ref actually wanted to give us a penalty once for it because it was against protocol. I'm like, I think you're missing the point here. We're not doing it to, cause trouble. We're doing it because it's what we believe in. But, my question is, probably relevant to coaches as well, is when you get, a player or a family who says, yes, we buy into what you're doing, we trust you, but then they start to get sucked in by the bells and whistles. And, obviously as a teenager and maybe I'm not sure when you start to recruit your players, but, I see on the female side, player changes a lot between 14 and 18 or 20. And maybe what they thought was right for them at 14 isn't right at 16 or what have you. So how do you deal with that when those families or players' values seem not to mesh up anymore? Do you kick them to the curb? Do you try to bring them around to the right side? Like, how do you manage those challenging situations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I can think of a couple of situations I'm probably dealing with right now. And one is a young player. And Kim, we have to recruit these top players at 14 and 15. I mean, when you're looking at, in order to get them, you have to be after them that young. It's crazy. So, I can think of one instance right now where I have a young player where it's not so much the player, it's the mother. And she's, calling me about these different tournaments and rankings and stuff. And I have to just dial her back. I'm like, I say, Paula, don't worry about that stuff. Like, we talked about this in the first meeting and the second meeting and the first conversation, that stuff does not matter. I said, your son wants to be a Division I hockey player, which he has the potential to be. And if he gets to that level, then, maybe he's got a potential to be a pro hockey player. But this rankings that some, Twitter site or something is putting out, or Instagram site, that doesn't mean anything. That's just somebody's opinion who's sitting at a hockey game or sitting behind a screen. So I try to dial them back, or, I really do. But then at the next level, I have a player right now who didn't make the USA Select Festival camp, and by all accounts, he should have made it. He's not committed to a Division I school right now, and that's kind of by choice. A lot of these kids commit early, and the 5 defensemen that were picked to go from this region are all committed. And the evaluators who picked those for that festival camp are all college coaches who, that's their players that they've picked, or been selected. And this guy is left out to dry. And I've talked to USA Hockey about it, and I've talked to different people, and there's a lot of politics going on with it. We all know that. The family knows that. But there's definitely a level of management. And the kid is great. He said, Doug, this is just motivation for me. I'm going to take this and I'm going to shove it up there. I'm going to work and just get past this. but the dad's a little higher maintenance, and so I'm having to put a little bit more time in with the dad. And I'm like, Billy, like, we've always talked about this, like he didn't commit to a school because we felt it was too early. And, you're going to have to wade through some of this garbage. Like he's just going to have to push and push and push. That's the end goal, or not the end goal, but the number one goal is a Division I scholarship. And then the end goal is to become a pro. So like this is a step that he's going to, I guess miss, but it's fine. It's not detrimental to, the process of getting to the goals. So yeah, Kim, I just try to talk them through it. I just bring them back to day one of like, hey, we've had this conversation. You cannot get sidetracked. So you lose some of them, you keep some of them. That's part of it, and Bob, just back on your point is I really am on your page, completely with what you said. I mean, the player is not a fit for me if he's worried about, me getting him drafted in the first round, because I'm not going to do that. He's got to do the work. He's the one that's got to do the work. She's the one that's got to do the work. I can't get them drafted. And if I'm out there pushing to get a player drafted a few spots higher, I almost believe that's more detrimental to their development. Like they need to do it.
Doug, they need to carry their hockey bags is the bottom line. And Dominic, I talked to him earlier before joining Skype, but Dominic, you shared some stories related to similar stories related to your tryout camps with the prep team and with the Sharks minor hockey program. And I wonder if you could mention a little bit about yourself and that for the audience here, because it does connect with this topic and the parents influencing choices, the kids just going miles. And in California, they have money to do that. So Dominic, would you add to that before we go to Matt? Okay.
Yeah. So, just to clarify a little bit, I'm helping out with the Sharks junior program. They have had their AAA tryouts were this past weekend, and it was amazing to see just the migration of players just everywhere in the kind of the continental U.S. and even into Canada, if you will, just based on perception that their son wouldn't have the right program in San Jose. And so it was shocking, actually. There's going as far as out to Boston. There's one kid that was a part of this program here. So we've had this prep school has had a boys program for the last 3 years, and for the first 2 years was a part of the school. He's a local kid. And then with COVID, moved away to Omaha to play at their AAA program. And then, I was talking with them, obviously a little bit busy with our season and talking with the dad and everything else. And then he's made the decision to go to Boston, just based on, I'm promised this, and this. And it's really difficult to compete. Like you can't. And I empathize for the coaches for the Sharks program. There's a 2006 birth year, and just to give a perspective, every year the Sharks have 300 mites that come up through the program, like every single year. So they have a massive group to start with. They had 13 players sign up for their 06 team, barely enough. Hopefully they're hoping that there'll be some disgruntled people in other programs that are going to eventually end up here in San Jose. But it was eye-opening to me for sure to see. And then again, I'm trying to recruit for my own team, and so I'm getting the disgruntled parent that are calling me and talking about strength of schedule and everything else. And the one thing for me is like so I'm at a Catholic school, private Catholic school. They've been around for 140 years. And they have their baseball program has put out like 40 major league players. So they have a precedent of athletic achievements and also academics. And no one's talking about school. Like it's like everybody, like it's just an afterthought. And you know, and for me, I'm just like, well, you know, eventually, and to truth be told, a lot of these kids won't, like, they'll be paid to play until, like, that's it. Like no one's gonna pay them to play ever. And so to be able to kind of navigate that conversation, like, you should probably put some thought into your kids' education. Like, and again, it's just mind blowing to me, and everybody's kind of has, you know, a snicker on their face, because I'm sure you all can, you know, can relate to it. But yeah, it's eye opening. Wally, you're muted.
Matt, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, Doug, just listening to you, I mean, it's clear that there are some universal truths when it comes to recruiting, right? And it doesn't matter sort of what the format you're in. It's I find myself recruiting into a university program, a lot of the same sort of issues, right? And you know, I get families that get enamored with the hype, and the big one that is here in Canada is, and I've got to be careful because there's 2 American grad females on the call right now, but the hype of basically of going down to the States, but without even considering the Canadian option. I mean, I certainly appreciate that there's obviously great schools and great programs down in the States, but you know, it's a dismissive sort of attitude in terms of the Canadian experience. But I've also had situations where it's a split, and I'll have a family come for a tour, and the parents are very pro Canada, or at least considering Canada, and the kids, you could tell she's basically, I'm only here because my parents dragged me here today, and there's no chance she wants to stay here. Or the reverse. I've had you know, a player come in and really like what she sees, you know, but her mom and dad say no, you know, we've got to go down and chase a scholarship or whatever the case may be. So when you're signing someone, particularly at that age, they're a minor. So I'm assuming, not to get too legal about it, but your contracts with the parents. So have you ever had a situation where, you know, you're signing a kid and the parents are on board, but you kind of tell the kid is got his eye maybe wishing he was somewhere else, or do you just not follow through in that form in that scenario unless the whole family's on board?
Yeah, I think ideally, well, first of all, it's all a handshake agreement, and really, at the end of the day, it's a handshake agreement right up until they sign an NHL contract. And that's really the way the business is. They can leave you at any time. Once they sign their NHL contract and they sign a player agent agreement with you, they're locked in, you know, with you for just that contract, and they can fire you after that contract if they want. So not a lot of certainty, but yeah, I mean, I think in that situation, I'm probably, you know, not going down the path, you know, with them. I probably want to have both parties on board, you know, the parents and the player. But, you know, as time goes on, you may have recruited someone who's 15, and then by the time they're 17, 18, you know, either the players drifted or the parents have drifted or the parents are seeing stars. And I mean, the Jerry Maguire movie, I'm telling you, like, it is spot on. I mean, I have more players under NHL contracts that I used to represent that I have that I currently do represent under NHL deals. So I've lost, you know, I've lost a number of players, and I mean, in particular, one of them is right out of that movie. He's the guy that walks. He's the guy that, you know, paraded around and said, "Doug, we're the most loyal people, and you know, our word is oak," and da 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 da. And then, you know, on the eve of him being a first-round pick, you know, I get the call of, "Hey, yeah, oh yeah, we're moving on to another group," you know, and the kid and I felt a tremendous relationship, and I try to talk to the kid about it, but of course he's 18, dad's still sort of calling the shots, you know. So yeah, you may have a great feeling at the start, I guess, is Matt is kind of the answer, but it certainly can drift, or, you know, parents can start to see stars or kids. It's tough.
Yeah, and I didn't appreciate. Thanks, Doug. I didn't appreciate that it worked that way. That's another similarity, right? And so when we get a commitment prior to grade 12, it's all verbal, and you're just hoping you can get to September 1st of grade 12 and you can sign a letter of intent, and things get a little bit more formal at that point. But it sounds like the process is extremely similar. And I just want to follow up publicly to Kim's chat note there that I agree with you, Kim, and you're actually one of the best in the area about doing what's best for your athlete, right? And so it's just all about making sure that all the options are open to them and trying to find the best fit for them. And there's no doubt in my mind that you do one of the best jobs of doing that. And it's probably a big reason why there's next year going to be 3 former Kim coached players on my team. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, Matt, and a captain too, which you told
Yes.
me, which I of course I sent one of my former players is Matt's captain next year, and I sent her a congratulatory text because she would never tell me if anything amazing happened. Like she's like, oh, it's all the stuff you did, Kim. You're so great. Like the humility is unbelievable. But just to piggyback on that, no different than Doug and everybody else on this call, it's putting players where they're able to succeed, right? Academically and athletically. And in female hockey, there's no $1 million contracts yet, right? So, their academics has to be the priority. And, as an Ivy Leaguer, I have to say, I do promote that path if it's, if the kid is an Ivy Leaguer, and that's not an everybody thing. Even in female hockey, that is a very big carrot to be able to play at an Ivy League school for a variety of reasons. One being the hockey teams are generally quite good there. But it's not an easy path. And so it's, while a lot of people aspire to it, it's not necessarily the best direction to go because of the challenge of it academically mixed with the athletics. But the U Sport path is, if you want world-class academics mixed with world-class hockey, you're pretty much guaranteed to have that at any school you pick, which is why I think in the female game, it should be the preferred path for the majority of players. And generally the players tend to stick at the school they started at and have a better overall experience than maybe some of the NCAA options.
Kim, Matt, this is a thought. In my years, I've always thought of 2 schools, Queens and McGill, as being Ivy League schools, relative to reputation, not in terms of, the North America, the Ivy League is a very powerful world. And I always joke when I was scouting, people tell me, where have you been? I said, well, I've been to these, Ivy League schools, Harvard and all the places. I made a point of visiting all those schools just to say I'd been to those schools because of the reputation. But when I was working at Hockey Canada, parents would ask me, what school should I choose? What school should I choose? And they were looking for their hockey outcome in that. And I just said, well, what do you want to do when you're done hockey? That's the key question. Gotcha. And that just sort of goes over their heads, and they forget that. But it's always been a foundational way of approaching things, sticking to your guns, Doug. And in time, I believe you'll have success with it. I think the problems that coaches deal with the NHL and the problems NHL players have to deal with is those players that do get drafted high, that come up the ladder, do not necessarily have the life skills necessary to compete to win a Stanley Cup. And so what Alan Andrews said to me yesterday, he says, well, the teams that haven't made the playoffs, that haven't advanced, there's a lot of players there that never carried their hockey bags growing up. So I wanted to get back to that values-based foundation, character base. Bobby Laux, you've got your hands up.
Well, yeah, a number of things that have come up. First of all, when I recruited, and I think Dom could back me up on this because I did recruit him. When you're recruiting somebody, you're recruiting based on what you can offer the player and what your program can offer the player. I never felt that it was appropriate to recruit against somebody else's program. In our case, I was in the Western Hockey League, so the people that we would be recruiting against would be NC2A schools. And I remember having this conversation with Dom and his parents. At the time that I went to visit Dom, the way the league works out here is you can be drafted or listed, and the team owns your rights. And when I went to visit with Dom and his parents, he was a slighter player, and I wasn't convinced that the Western Hockey League was the route for him. And we talked about maybe he should take another year, play Tier 2 junior, and maybe look at the college route. But Dom was convinced that he was going to play in the Western Hockey League. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a pro. He knew that he was going to get a good scholarship from the Western Hockey League, which all junior leagues give now. So education at the end is still available. And I knew when I left their house that Dom was going to be a good player because he knew what he wanted. He knew what he had to do to get there. He knew, and his parents knew, that education was important to me and that he was going to have to continue to keep his grades up while he was in our program, or he wouldn't be playing. So I think you recruit, whether you're an agent, a coach, a general manager, you've got to bring in people that I think that can succeed in your program. You don't recruit against others because other programs have great things to offer as well. So you're kind of recruiting you're recruiting the player based on what the player is going to feel about you when you exit that meeting. Also, you have to feel good about the player. And I think the player has to know what he wants and what his short-term goals are, his long-term goals. I think that was one thing that Dom was very clear on as a young player, and I give his parents credit for that. Most parents, all they see is dollar sign. All they're looking at is, how can I get my kid in the NHL? How much money can he make? Basically, it's on how many goals can he score, and are you going to put him on the right line so that he can do that? And I've seen that over and over and over again. And a number of years ago, and this is going back quite a few, when Bobby Orr was starting his agency, he asked me directly what he needed to do to get the players. What did the players want? And we had a conversation about that. And I don't really know much about Bobby Orr's agency other than he has a lot of pretty good players, and his name would draw players without question. So those are things, Doug, that you would be recruiting against. I can name you all kinds of agents that you say the player's not committed to you until you sign the contract, which is true. But I can name you all kinds of agents that have put cars or money or something in the pockets of the player or the parents so that they feel like they're committed to them. I'm sure that once those things happen, you're not really committed to the agent. You're committed to paying back the loan for sure. I'm sure there's a contract there, but I can tell you, I don't know how many times where a player was committed to an agent and another agent that supposedly had the higher profile would come along and tell them, well, I can do this for you and I can do that for you. And would you like this new Jeep to drive till you finish junior or whatever the case may be? And I've seen that over and over and over again. And I'm going to tell you that in most cases, when those kids left and went to that higher profile agent, it didn't work out. It just didn't. The player is only going to get what he earns, what he makes. He's got to put in the work, as Wally says. You got to carry your hockey bag, and that's the bottom line. Period. And the agent will get for you what you deserve, but you will get what you earn.
Agree more on that.
Dominic.
Yeah, no, just to give you kind of the other side, the other perspective, when Lauxie came and talked to me and my parents, and I interesting because I've referenced this talk a couple times with the players that I'm now recruiting, and my parents did not want me to play major junior hockey. They wanted me to play. I had Newell Brown. He wasn't supposed to be able to come visit. He came and was, trying to, get me to go. He was at Michigan Tech there at the time. And and Lauxie's right. Like, I wanted to play in the Western League and I was determined to go. And truth be told, my first year, I probably should have played Tier 2 because I wasn't ready. I was very slight. I think I grew from my 17-year-old year to my 18-year-old year. I think I grew 5 or 6 inches. And, Lexi was right. I probably should have stayed and play tier two. And there was times like Lauxie didn't play me, and I shouldn't have been playing. And my dad would come travel 4 hours to watch, and I wouldn't get a shift. But credit to my parents, they didn't say anything, right? They didn't say anything. They basically said, "We're gonna stick by you. We're gonna you've made this decision," and ultimately it was the accountability on me. And I was like, you know what, I better do some things over the summer, and then I came back that next year, and I was bigger and stronger, and ended up having 120 points. I didn't score a goal after Christmas and had 120 the next year because that 1 year development. So sure, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that
Good
my
coaching,
parents
Dom.
could have. What's that?
That was good coaching, Dom.
But my parents could have came for sure. They could have come in, swooped in, and been like, you know what? This is a terrible situation for you. We're going to bring you somewhere else. We're going to, and not trust, what was going on. And so it's, and as I say, I credit my parents. My parents didn't know, they knew, my dad's from Italy, came in and was very, very blind to everything that was going on. But, there was there was good people involved. There was Lauxie, there was Bob Bartlett, there was a GM that was involved in the program and enabled us to stay through. And the one thing was, like, I was in the French immersion program, and that was the one thing for my mom. She's like, you need to get this French. Like, you started this French immersion. Like, I got abuse that I got living in Calgary, learning being able to speak French was like, there's nobody in Calgary that could speak French. But she's like, you better get this bilingual diploma. And so I had to go to a different school just based on that. But yeah, ultimately, my parents being able to, to basically giving me the accountability, be like, okay, all right, you're making the call here. And then, but you know what, it kicked me into gear as well, because I was like I better do some things here and be committed to the process and everything else. And hey, the first year wasn't easy. Like, moving away from home, Lauxie had to ground me basically gave me curfew for a month, because I was out with my girlfriend at the time or something, and basically said, okay, you've got 8 o'clock curfew for a month. And so he called me for a month at 8 o'clock. But you know what? It held me accountable, and to be able to, to figure out, like, you can't piss around, right? So as I say, there's a lot of learning on my part, and accountability piece, and everything that goes through it. So, but it's it's definitely, you need to have the understanding parents, and I think it comes back to having the foundation of the parents that are, if you have whack job as parents, like, I think you're going to be in one. Doug, I'm sure you're smirking, because I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. I like that terminology,
Dr. Lou, you have your hand up. I'm curious what you're thinking as you listen to everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by what I've heard so far about, parents and kids and the athletes and what they want. I have a third perspective. Because of the research that I've done, I've spoken to hockey parents and their kids, and so they're about 14, 15-year-olds. And so the question that I've asked them is, well, what if you don't get drafted? Because this is everybody's big dream, okay? So to be drafted, first off, into the NHL. So they want to be drafted. So what's the plan? What would you do? If they're not drafted, then they go to what they call Plan B, which is if they get into a Division I college, let's say, because nobody's talking about going to Canadian University, unfortunately. But if they get into Division I university, college, then they'll give up their hockey and they'll just go and get an education. But that wasn't what I meant when, what's your plan B? What I was interested in was because a number of players still make it into the NHL or into the NFL, even though they're not drafted. There are other ways to get into the professional leagues, but they have to do it in a roundabout way. Somebody who comes to mind is the defenseman with the Calgary Flames, the captain.
Giordano.
Giordano.
Yeah, Giordano. I mean, he didn't get drafted, and he went all the way to Europe, came back. He stayed in Stockton or whatever the farm team was at the time, for a couple of years. He developed himself. He was just at the point of quitting and going to, I think, York University to study business when the Flames finally made a commitment to him. So what I wanted to know was how committed the kid was at making that goal that they had. And I was fairly disappointed to hear that they weren't really that committed. And so, they've got, I don't know if they ever talked to their scouts about what they were thinking, but they certainly did have scouts. And so that's my perspective, is that how surprised I was at the fact that they really weren't going to do everything that they possibly could to make their goal.
Doug, can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I guess, Joni, can you just maybe clarify like a little bit more of the question, kind of just fine tune it a little bit for me, like exactly, because I have some thoughts on it. I just want to know like exactly what you're asking there.
Well, I'm just making a comment. I'm not really making a question. So it's a third perspective.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I have a lot of experience with, I mean, basically all my guys I represent, none of them have been drafted, and like, you look at, Giordano there and his path, and Philip Myers. Dom, I don't know if you were in Calgary when Philip went to development camp. It would have been in 2015, I guess. He wasn't drafted, and, Brad came up to me on the draft floor and said, hey, can we have him at camp? I'm like, yeah. So he goes to camp, and, the kid said to me, he said, I felt really good there. I thought I played really well. Wally, I think you were actually you took in some of that camp. It was a summer development camp they have for prospects. And, the guys called me, from the Flames and just said, Shep, like, we got a lot, we have a lot of, we got 9D here under contract, and, we like him and but, and they probably did, but there was really no room for him. It's kind of one of those camps where you get to look at a kid. So, Philip thought he did really well. And I explained to him, what could have happened. I said, hey, you showed well. I mean, there just might not be room for you. So, like, just keep your head up and we keep going. And he went to Philadelphia's rookie camp later, in the fall, and signed a free agent deal with them, 2 months later. So I don't think it was necessarily the disappointment of the Calgary camp, that got him through into Philadelphia. I think it was a mindset that he had from when, junior, when he got drafted by Ruan Aranda in the 4th round, and said, hey, I don't care about, Moncton or Halifax or any of these teams. I'm going to go to the small market team and prove myself. Like he didn't, it was something that was already instilled. So I think a lot of those kids, I mean, I had lunch with Ross Johnson the other day, who's with the Islanders. He's not playing right now. He's a healthy scratch, which is another, huge issue that you deal with these players, right? But, I'm like, how you doing? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm excited about the run. And, if there's an injury and I get in, great. And, he's 27 years old. He's been, like a 13th forward in the NHL for 5 years. But he's a farmer from PEI, like he shovels manure in the summers and he plows fields. And so it's just instilled in him that he's going to grind it out. And if he gets in, he's going to do a good job, just like he did last year when he got in against Philadelphia in the 2nd round. He got in a game and was a star of the game. Like he just did his job, So I think, these kids that are able to carry their own bags, like Wally says, and these farmers and these guys that, they've seen adversity, growing up or coming through it, they're able to adapt, and, Dom, that's a great story about Dom and his dad, and like, not getting involved, Bob sits him out or scratches him, and, the parent, Dom, I assume your dad drove you home and probably told you how good, you're going to be, like hang in there. And he was a positive influence, like that is just so important, and, I think we're just back up to like, an hour ago in the conversation, we're just living in this world of like now, and me, and there's no loyalty. Like people just, they can't wait. Like they can't wait, like not even wait. They can't work like Dom would have worked that year when he was getting healthy scratched. Like they don't want to tell their buddies that. They don't want to post that on Instagram, that they got healthy scratched. It's too embarrassing. They don't want to go through the process, So anyways, I'm kind of getting a little overexcited, I guess, on that topic and kind of, getting off track. But I guess I feel that just that character that's instilled in these kids at a young age, and then, a lot of it by their parents, like it's going to help them.
I'd like to mention, this is a personal insight, Dominic, in your story, making the choices you've made. And I've gone through getting 2 degrees and then going to the national team and playing minor pro. And it sort of was, I wasn't willing to pay that price and sacrifice my life to that. And I remember coaching a year of major junior hockey, not lasting the season, being a head coach, but I would never trade that experience. What I learned, what those kids learned, the life skills they acquired in terms of the challenge, the adversity, you can't put a dollar sign on that kind of an education. And when they're done, and I look at what Dominic has done, where he's played, what he's doing, working with the Flames, everything he can in hockey, coming full circle now to work in a prep school program. And he's been on our Sharks group literally since we've gone online. I think it's a tribute to what the sport can teach you. And that's really something I had to say on that. So, Dom, your hand's up. I'm going to get Al Ramsey if he would introduce himself first. And we have Dr. Joanne Liu and Doug Shepard on. Al, go ahead, Al.
Sure. Hey, Doug. I'm actually in kind of a similar area there. I'm actually coaching with the Bridgewater Bandits this year.
Okay.
And I'm the hockey director at Tri-County Saints in Taunton.
Yes. Okay.
But it's amazing, like your last comment, right, about the parent involvement. It's amazing to see, like, at what young an age the parent involvement is just out of control in some cases. Like I've just seen, like, this year experiencing some players that are, probably in the right spot, but the parents believe that, there's a higher spot available to them, and just, taking them out and jumping ship, taking them away from their friends that they've been with for the last couple of years, and rather than sticking it out and grinding out to build a program. It's kind of crazy right now. But, I think there are a lot of people, like even in our area, I think there's a lot of people that are trying to do the right things, and hopefully we have an influence on that.
Okay. Dom, did you have your hand up?
Luxie had his hand up here before me.
Okay. Bobby?
Just kind of an answer to Dr. Liu there. I think what you need to do, doctor, is get a lot of examples like Giordano's example, and relate that to players. There's all kinds of them out there. Jerome McGinley was not drafted into the Western Hockey League. Joffrey Lupo wasn't drafted into the Western Hockey League. Those were players that end up being first-round impact players in the NHL. There's all kinds of examples of that. There's all kinds of examples of kids that played at different levels that didn't get a pro contract right away, but worked their way into it. The one thing I used to always say to players, and Dom, you may remember this, who works the longest, the hardest, will have the most success in the long run. And I truly believe that. As Wally said, carry your own bag. I think those are things that all players, if they will stick to it, if they're committed, if they believe in themselves and they work at it, they, if they have at least a certain amount of skill, they can make it in the end. Then the other thing we talked about was, what do you do with players that have nut job parents? I would never pit a player against a parent. You can't do that. As a coach or an agent or whatever, I think you've got to let the player know that when he's in with you or on the ice with you or in a conversation with you, you are there for the player to coach the player. The parent is the parent, and you can never come between the parent and the player. So the parents when he's at home, I always told my players, listen to your parents, be polite, but do as I say at the rink, do as what they say when you're at home. When it gets to be an adult, it's a little bit different, but the player cannot have 2-3 coaches. He's got to have his coaches at the rink, and then his parents are, coaches are responsible for life skills and role modeling as well. But you can't get between them. It's simple as that. You're gonna just end up in a battle.
Dom?
Yeah, I just wanted to add because I was running the development camp or helping running the development camp when Myers was in Calgary at that point, and I remember the depth. I don't even know if you'd call it depth, just the amount of committed contracts they had to defense, and even in the minors they had 10 guys, and that was I think that was our first year in Stockton, or it might have been when we were in Adirondack. So. I think I've seen it a lot. There'll be guys coming into development camp, and they show really, really well. And there's guys that are committed, whether they're draft picks or they're, favors or whatever it is that ends up being. But like again, it's countless the amount of guys that you see come in. And they're and they're coming in different ages, whether it's 19 or 21, 22, and then you fast forward 4 or 5 years, and they've grinded through it, and then they'll pop up somewhere else. And a lot of that is the intent on the player, and I say it a lot, like it's a battle of attrition, like to be able to play. Just to be able to play pro at a higher level or wherever it is. And, just referencing that with Giordano. So I played with Gio at the Spengler Cup, and it was 2007. And he was going through contract dispute with Calgary. They weren't wanting to give him a one-way deal. And he went to Russia. Like, of all places, he went to Russia. And I'm not sure if those on the call are familiar with Russia, but it's literally a different world. Like, there's like to be able to go over there and to be able to keep your sanity, because the rules are all different. Like, it's just, but he was focused on what he wanted to do. We ended up coming and playing in Spengler Cup, which is basically a collection of guys that have played. They're on the back end of their career, playing in Europe for the most part, skill guys, but and was one of the guys. And then fast forward, when I took my first job as a skill coach in Calgary, he was the guy after practice that was coming to me and be like, I need to do some stuff on my footwork. I need to do some stuff, for shots, and like very, very open to suggestion, like changing. He changed the height of his stick. He wanted a bigger paddle, but he was a student of himself, and so constantly searching for ways to improve his game. And then you see him win the Norris at 36 or whatever it is. It's a true testament to his constant desire to improve himself. And I'll be honest with you, there was guys within Calgary that would be Giordano, right? Chirping him, like being the cool guy, being like, this guy's working too hard. Like, I'm just going to sit back with my feet out. Why are you doing the extra? Right? Like, and that was literally, you would hear guys say that. And that was some of the better players on that team would be saying, like, Giordano. And I would reflect on that and be like, no wonder why, and said players are not even in the league anymore, just because of that attitude, right? So again, it comes down to the intent of the player. It comes down to how vested are they at getting better. I know we've talked about a podcast by Marty St. Louis where he talked about just being like his own self accountability, his own self assessment. And I think with Giordano, and